Today we are joined by Martha Bueno, a Libertarian who recently ran for commissioner at Miami-Dade and a proud mother of four. How are you? Thanks, Martha, for coming on. And I hope you're doing well. How's it going?
It's going well. Like you said, we just ended a campaign for commissioner here in Miami, and I came in second place. So it didn't end exactly as I hoped, but it went well. Can't complain.
Yeah, we definitely will go into that a bit more because I'm sure there's a lot more to that story. If many people don't know, she ran for county commissioner in Miami-Dade, but we'll go into that in a little bit more detail as we go on. But yeah, I guess just for people who don't know who you are and what you did and what you do, just give a bit of a brief background, your story, where you came from, and how you've sort of got to where you are now.
Well, I guess we're talking politically. So for those that don't know me, I have been a long-term libertarian within the party and now without the party. I recently just ran for commissioner of Miami-Dade County, which is the 7th largest county in the United States. So it's a really big role. There's 13 commissioners. I was running to be one of those commissioners. Before that, I've been the vice chair of a community council. I was the vice chair of the Libertarian Party of Miami-Dade before that. I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I've dedicated my life to, and an activist. I've been an activist for cannabis and all things freedom for quite a few years. And how did I get here? So I tend to say that communism follows me around. And I say that because my father was a political prisoner in Cuba. He was taken prisoner for trying to leave Cuba in the 70s. That was illegal back then. And he was given a 6-year sentence. He started off in maximum security in like a regular prison for people who are political prisoners. And then for good behavior, he was allowed to work. They have these work camps in Cuba where my mom was able to break him out. And he made it to the U.S. And after being in the U.S. for a few years, he realized that Venezuela back in the 70s was a great country. My dad was a farmer and he wanted to continue farming. So he started a company in Venezuela and we all moved there. I was born here in the United States. People think I'm, not American. I am. I was born here in the U.S. and then I moved to Venezuela and with my parents, obviously, and communism follows there. For those that don't know, Venezuela, it was, late 90s, Venezuela elected somebody who had trained with Fidel Castro in Cuba, somebody that was a guerrilla fighter, and he took over Venezuela, expropriated businesses from people, basically the same story as Cuba. And fast forward 20 plus years, and Venezuela is one of the poorest nations now in the world and filled with all sorts of horrible things going on there. So obviously I moved back to the US and I feel like communism just kind of follows me around. And now it's something that I worry about what's happening here in the US as well. I think a lot of people don't understand the situation with governments and how government is never your friend. Government never is on your side. And so I feel like it's my life mission to make sure that people understand this concept.
Thank God people now realize that more and more. Because it's kind of more in our faces now. But one thing that I wanted to touch upon, like you said, is Cuba as an example, because many people don't really know what was going on there. Maybe a lot of listeners don't really understand the situation and how it was. Obviously, you can explain that firsthand. And maybe we can see some references that are worrying for the US and other Western countries now. So I guess just go into maybe how it was in Cuba during those times. I mean, maybe it wouldn't be you directly, but I guess your parents.
My whole family, and I still have family living in Cuba, which is what worries me, which is why I fight so hard to make sure that Cuba can one day be free. But so the history of Cuba is it's a fascinating story. Cuba has never really been a free country. Before it belonged to Spain, and there was, uprisings, and the United States actually came in the Spanish-American War and won and got Spain out of Cuba. So, the United States has been its liberator before. And then Cuba ended up having other dictators. The last one before Fidel Castro was Batista. He was a dictator for Cuba, and that was where, Fidel came in saying, I'm going to get rid of this dictator and our lives are going to be so much better. And the Cubans were like, yes, we definitely want that. There's tons of videos of Fidel over the years saying, no, I'm not a socialist. I don't believe in those. I'm not a communist. Fast forward, yes, he was. And as soon as he took power, the first thing he did was start beating and repressing people. There's actually history that shows us that he went into Havana and killed young men, boys, from their beds. He's a mass murderer, and his buddy Che Guevara was a part of that. He was one of the masterminds of that strategy. And then Fidel has trained over the years other people, not only within Cuba, but as I mentioned, Hugo Chavez was one that he trained with. Gustavo Petro, who just won office in Colombia, also trained with Chavez. So his plan was not only Cuba and to turn Cuba into a communist socialist paradise. It was for all of Latin America. His plan was for all of Latin America to be what the USSR was. And he's achieved it in death, which is the most impressive thing about Cuba, is that it continues to expand. Cuba is basically the capital of Venezuela. Cuba is what is happening in Venezuela. It's just an extension of Cuba. So what is happening in Cuba? Well, the government controls everything. Every dollar or MLC or peso Cuban or whatever that the Cubans can have comes from the government. Nobody is allowed to have an industry outside of the government. So this means that the government can control whether you can eat, whether you can work, everything about your life. And so they've controlled it to the point where people have zero freedoms. Cuba's an island. It's surrounded by waters. It's surrounded by animals in those water, fish. Yet Cubans are not allowed to fish. Cubans, it's against the law. You must be part of the state in order to go out and fish. You cannot own a fishing boat, for example. And so Cubans can't feed themselves. They're not allowed to farm. Cuba has a lot of land that would be great for people to be able to farm and feed themselves. They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to own this land. They're not allowed to farm. It's illegal for you to have fruits and vegetables growing in your own home. It's illegal for you to grow your own animals. And so all of these things keep the Cuban people repressed. And now there's no medicine. Cuba claims to be a modern marvel of medicine, and yet they have no medicine. You cannot get the simple things like Tylenol for a headache or aspirin, or, that's why we saw these big uprisings during the July 11th protests of last year, of 2021. It was the first time that the Cuban population all over Cuba went out against the government. And that started kind of a movement that we're seeing now of people asking for freedom. So what's going on in Cuba? It's a mess. You cannot eat, you cannot feed yourself, you cannot feed your family, you cannot get medicine, and you can't leave. You are forced to stay there and be part of this regime. And so it's a terrible situation. It's been happening for 63 years. And unfortunately, there's no end in sight.
Yeah, I mean, the scary part is that they've stopped people from growing stuff and actually fishing and like just eating, basically. I mean, how did they get away with that? I mean, wasn't there any like pushback at all? Or was it just they've been armed so heavily that they just repress anyone who even has a voice?
Basically, so it's illegal to have arms, even the military, even the Cuban military. Every child after the age of 15 has to go into forced military service. They must serve their country. So they're taught how to use arms, but they're not allowed to have it. Their military is issued weapons if they are needed. It's not like most people have them. So, and things degrade. So even people that had maybe a weapon back in the day, after some time, your weapon needs maintenance. So nobody in Cuba has a way to defend themselves. And so the government has a complete control of everything. And it wasn't until recently that Cubans got access even to the internet. That happened in 2018. And so what people don't realize is now they're getting more information from Cuba because Cuba now is opening up. People can film themselves. They have cell phones. Technology is happening. And that technology has been beautiful in the sense that we've been able to watch what's happening there and be able to exchange ideas. up until 2018, Cubans thought that they really lived in the best country in the world. They had no idea because they didn't have anything to compare it to, and what they're seeing now is the reality is it's the complete opposite. It's, they go through lines, 6, 8, 10-hour lines to get a piece of chicken, and you get to the front of the line and there's none left. When then they're able to see us here in America go to the supermarket, and not only is there tons of chicken for anyone to just grab, but we don't even make lines. So I think, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because the same is true for us here living in America, having to watch our people being repressed via cell phone. I had a front row seat to government beating the people during the July 11th protests. And after those protests, there were over 800 people that were put into jail simply because they don't agree with the government, of which 50 of those were children 13 to 17 years old. So 50 kids were given sentences of more than 10 years just for going out and speaking up and saying, we don't want this system that we didn't choose. And, I could keep going on this subject forever, and I don't want to bore people, but it's really bad. It's really, really bad. And when you talk to Americans, especially, they're like, but they get free healthcare. No, it's not free healthcare if you don't have access to anything. It's not free healthcare to go to the hospital. And they're like, oh, we'd love to suture you up, but we don't have, sutures. We don't have any anesthesia. We don't have bags of saline to give you if you're dehydrated. We don't have things. How is that free healthcare, and how is that something that people are actually saying is a good thing? I don't understand.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to now see it kind of fits in line with some movements in how the West and other developed countries are now moving towards. And it's quite an interesting one when you're talking about potentially food shortages and stuff like that. You can now see why, okay, maybe like they're pushing us towards a communist style takeover, really, when you can see, okay, maybe there will be food shortages so people could then start queuing up for food. And then only government regulated people or people with some sort of pass can be allowed to actually use that. So those are the dangers of communism, because I always get so many people who are basically communist leftists that I've met recently, but they don't think about that it's never worked. It's never worked. There hasn't been a good example of it working ever. So, and
they always tell you it's because they didn't implement it right. Yeah. They didn't implement it right. But my pushback to that is, I hate Fidel Castro. I am glad he's dead, and I hope he's rotting in hell. However, we can't say that he wasn't brilliant. He was honestly a very intelligent human being who, as I mentioned, in death is able to still continue his plans that he set up years later. We're talking about 10 plus years after his death. Now, most of Latin America has fallen to his plan and is rising in the socialist movement. This man was a genius for evil. So if your evil genius can't make this work well, why would you think your second-rate tyrant is going to do it? So it's like, well, it's never been tried well enough. Well, it has, and it doesn't work. And that's the reality of it. It's not the recipe. It's not the cook. It's the recipe. The recipe is flawed.
Yeah. And with capitalism, where people have maybe taken it wrong is, I think we're living in crony capitalism, but the government's too involved as well still. So it's like, it's not free market. I don't think it's really been trialed anyway. So, something that's never been trialed before.
We don't have a free market here.
No chance, no. America was potentially the closest thing to a free market at one point in its history, but definitely not anymore. Definitely not anymore. It's becoming the USSA.
And we see... Right. And we see people saying all the time, like, oh, well, the United States, look at how bad free market, capitalism works. And it's like, this isn't free market. This is not a free market. You cannot open a business in the United States without the government sanctioning it. Yeah. That is not a free market. A free market, I don't need anyone's permission to open a business. I don't need to go and register with my county to get an occupational license to tell me that I am able to attend to customers or whatever the case may be. We don't have a free market. And the biggest example of that is how the United States picks winners and losers. For example, over COVID, they chose which businesses could stay open and which ones had to shut down. You were either essential or non-essential. You either had the ability to go out and work and feed your family, or you had to be at home waiting for the government to feed you. That is not capitalism. And I really wish people could understand that concept, because it's the number one pushback I get from people is, well, America's capitalist and look how terrible it is. No, we're not.
Yeah. There is an argument of, like, for example, medical companies, the pharmaceutical industry is capitalist in a sense, but the fact that there's so many ties to government and policies in government that it's not free market. Because no one, I believe in a free market, we would have more competition, we wouldn't potentially use certain things, and you have more options. So yeah, I believe this is basically the start of the USSA, and potentially other parts of Europe.
Oh man.
Other parts of Europe, man. I'm seeing it here as well. Yeah, it is a bit sad, but I think there is pushback. Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting next decade. Like, potentially anything can happen at this point. So I'm not making 5-year plans. I'm making next month plan, and maybe up to 6 months. And you can't really know what's going to happen next. But we go with the flow. So
we go with the flow, but I think people need to know history. For sure, and I think that the thing that can save you now is to know that history. And that scares me about, when we talk to people and they're like, well, the government isn't your friend. I don't know how many times I can possibly say that, but the government isn't your friend. The government's not going to provide for you. And so if that's your backup plan is, well, the government, maybe it's time to make some plans. So don't plan long term, but definitely go find out how to make some food, grow some food.
Yeah, I mean, you know what?
Buy yourself some land.
For sure. We've outsourced all of our thoughts. We've outsourced all of our, just basically how to eat, how to even get water. So basically our survival is outsourced to government and other companies or whatnot. So we never really took responsibility for ourselves, and we learned how to do that through generations. And it's an interesting cycle to reverse. Like, I'm trying to find that now, and there's a lot to learn. But it's a real beautiful journey, though. Like, you're meant to, I believe, do this, like, to actually be responsible for your survival, and not just be like, the government can give me some healthcare, and let me not take care of myself or look into health protocols. But let's rely on the NHS or Canada's socialist healthcare, which people do. I believe if people was, if people were more healthy, if it was private healthcare, I believe people would be more conscious of their health, because they would have to spend money on private healthcare. And also the price would be lower anyway, because we'll have more competition on that anyway. But it's just an interesting thing.
But look at the U.S.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of that. Even though we claim to have, not socialized, we claim to have a free market in it, and we don't. We have anything but. And so people look to our system. They're like, well, but you go broke with this healthcare system. And it's like, yes, but because the government is so involved in it. So we can't find out ahead of time what things cost. And I can give you a quick example. I had a cat bite me. Come into my house. A random strange cat came into my house and bit me. I mean, the randomest thing. And I went to the hospital, and the treatment was over $20,000. And my insurance covered the vast majority of it, but I had to pay over $5,000 for rabies shots for a cat bite that I wasn't expecting and that I had nothing to do with it. And I contacted the insurance, and they're like, we couldn't tell you what it was because we didn't know how much it was, but now you're stuck paying for it. And so it's just, it's amazing how people think that this is a free market. If it was free market, I would have been able to call up several places and be like, what do you charge for rabies shots? Oh, you're so much. Let me go to you because the hospital is going to charge me $20,000. We don't have a free market. We have they're able to do whatever they want, and we have to pay for it because that's the way our government has set up. There is a free market in healthcare in the United States, but it's for things not covered by insurance. So, for example, laser eye surgery, like to fix your vision, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it used to be super expensive. It used to be $20,000 for your eyes to be fixed. And now it's $2,000 for the treatment. The price has gone down and the quality has gone up because you can't run that by your insurance. Your insurance does not cover LASIK eye surgery. So, I mean, I think that we need to look at those alternatives, that are free market and see what would happen if that was the case in America. Instead of demanding that the government come in, now we're asking the government to force insulin companies to produce insulin at $35. Why? We can just go across the border to Mexico and buy insulin for $8. Like, come on. Yeah. These fixes are not going to work. And yet we just keep pushing for more. It's frustrating. It really is.
It is a little bit, yeah, I have to admit. I mean, it's hard to tell people that, let's say, a socialist healthcare system, such as the NHS in the UK, there is no incentive to provide good service because there's basically zero competition. Now, where I am in Cyprus is mostly all private. They've brought in a new socialist thing where you contribute €6 a month and then you get onto their system. But mostly everything's still private. So you can call up so many different places and just get quotes and stuff. But the quality of service is night and day between the NHS and here. Completely different. They have an incentive to give you a good service for what they're providing because they'll get more customers and they'll get more money. And that's just how it works. But in the NHS has no incentive. They just want to.
Next time I need service.
So say again, sorry.
I need to come to Cyprus then. I'm saying that I'll keep that in mind next time I need healthcare because it seems better to just go to Cyprus than to have to deal with.
Yeah, it's pretty good. They have more of an...
I bet your wait times are better than ours.
Sorry, say again.
I'm betting your wait times for service is better than ours.
For sure. Like when you go private, like you're not waiting at all. Even in the socialist stuff, it's not much of a wait time because it's a small population. But like, I had an X-ray within 10 minutes of basically going there. I mean, there was no waiting. There's zero waiting. You just go to the place.
Beautiful.
And you just get a scan. You get the results there, and then you go back to the guy. He tells you what the issue is, and then you go home. Or he says you need, some sort of surgery or whatever. But everything happens quickly because of it being private. And yeah, I've noticed the difference in quality here because of that. Yeah, but most things here are still socialist as well.
I know that we don't have. We don't have that wait time that is excessive in America. I mean, there are some things like appointments for doctors that are pretty excessive, a month or two. But I have noticed a lot of Canadians come here for service. And that's because there's waits of years in Canada for certain procedures. So, even with a huge population like Canada, even with the socialist system being what it is, lots of Canadians still have to come to America for our services. So I just don't think that the socialist method that everyone wants to implement here in the United States is going to be the win that people think it is. And how do I know this? Well, history has told us, and you can already see the examples. As wonderful as it is that you can get treatment, that treatment always isn't the best. And I mean, come on, let's be honest. 100 years ago, if you had something wrong with you, they would bleed you to death and fill you up with leeches. We've come a long way. So the fact that people think that they have to have the best, the most advanced technology and for free blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more insecurity.
Where do we get off thinking that? Right? I mean... Yeah. You're not getting bled to death and you're not being filled with leeches today. Come on, people. Our service has improved, and it only improved because of that free market.
Indeed. I agree for sure. So let's move on to the running for commissioner, that experience. It was not long ago that you ran for commissioner in Miami-Dade. Just speak about that. I guess you have a lot to tell in regards to how it went down. First of all, congratulations as well for doing that. Putting yourself out there as someone who believes in freedom into the mainstream, really. Actually, it kind of did go mainstream a little bit. So yeah, I guess speak about the experience and what really happened there.
Wow. Yeah. So I just finished the run. It's only been about 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. I finished August 23rd. And as I mentioned, I came in second. It was a 4-way race for commissioner for Miami-Dade County. I came in second. I got just under 22% of the vote. My opponent, the main opponent, the Republican in the race, won outright with just over 50%. So the race is concluded, but we did not have to go into the November finals. It was done, thankfully, then and there. And my experience was that it took me a year out of my life to run. It was good and bad. I learned a lot. I think that I learned a lot about the system and what it really takes to run. A lot of libertarians talk about how libertarians aren't covered in the media. And I was able to break that cycle. I got on local media, I got on national media, and I got on international media. I was impressed with my own ability to do so. I worked on Dr. Jo Jorgensen's campaign. She ran for president as a libertarian in 2020. And she did not get on like Hispanic news stations, despite me trying to do it so much. And I did. So it tells you something when a presidential candidate can't make it, but a small seat like commissioner can. So media does not buy the win. I think that's a big thing for libertarians that think that, well, if only we can break that media, get on mainstream, we'll win. We won't. At least not in my experience. And the reason is it's so much more than that. There is so much corruption in the United States, in our election system, that I don't even know where to begin. But with my race, things that I found to be true were that votes are bought. And my opponent paid a company, a consulting company. He paid them $17,000 for absentee ballots. Absentee ballots means that they went and they collected the ballots, or they did something which is not even legal for a candidate to do. So there's a lot of things that are wrong. And then beyond that, with the election results, there are 2 websites for the election results, and they don't match up. There are more votes cast than ballots in some cases. And in other cases, there are a large number of ballots that were cast, and the votes don't match up to what the candidates received. So these are things that I'm asking the elections department to clarify how exactly it happened, and asking them to keep the ballots, to not toss them, so that we can audit them. Because I know I didn't win, and I am not intending to change the results, but I believe in election integrity, and I think we have to follow up. What a lot of people do is, well, I didn't win, and walk away, and I refuse to do that, because we have to hold these people accountable. There's another election coming up now in November across the United States, but here in Florida, we will be electing a governor. And if we don't address these issues, we're going to have yet another election where we're going to have irregularities and nobody's going to address them. So I hope that this becomes a main topic here in Florida, at least here in Miami, so that we are aware. I just recently became aware that the head of the elections department for Miami-Dade County makes almost $1 million of a salary every single year. And yet we have these issues. So we're definitely paying top dollar for people to do the work. And I demand that they do the work that we're paying them to do. Otherwise, they need to step aside and let people who actually want election integrity to step up and take over that job. It's unacceptable what's going on. And if I wouldn't have seen it with my own 2 eyes, I would be just as, hey, it is what it is. But we can't ask people to dedicate their time and to go out and try and win these seats and try and change the world if we're not even going to have free and fair elections.
Yeah, like we said before, I think it's, in my opinion, I don't, in the current state of affairs in the political sphere, I just don't see solutions being addressed there. Like people like yourself, I don't feel would be let to go far enough. Potentially they would. I just don't think they would let you go far enough to be a major influence just because of your thoughts that are more freedom based. So it's an interesting thing. So I personally think there is no solutions in the political system as it is. not to say that it's a waste of time that what you did, because it really woke people up. I'm guessing it affected people's lives in a sense that you managed to get some real exposure during that time, and I'm sure got a lot of people to think differently. I mean, what are your thoughts on the sort of system as it is? Because you actually were participating in it. I mean, do you think solutions can be made there, or has your sort of, because we spoke about it before, do you think your mind sort of changed now to sort of be like there isn't a solution in that system right now?
Right. I don't think that there's a solution in the political system. The political system was not set up so that we could change things.
Yeah.
And you can see that with it here in the United States. I don't know about the rest of the world, but definitely here in the United States, which is what I'm talking about. We have two major political parties. And as a former libertarian, I will tell you, no, you can be part of any other party if you want. But let's look at the reality. Nobody's won based on these other parties in a very long time. And why is that? Well, for the last 187 years of this country, we've only had two political parties. We've only had two groups of people writing rules. And what rules did they write? Surprisingly, they wrote rules to benefit themselves. So starting there, it's not like you can come in and be like, well, we don't agree with these things, so we're going to start a new party and we're going to have equal access. That's not the case. A quick example, in Tennessee, to get a candidate on the ballot for a Republican or a Democrat, it would be 25 signatures. But for an independent or third party, it would take 56,000 votes during Joe Jorgensen's election. That was the number they had given us, 56,000 signatures, to get on the ballot as a libertarian. So where is the equity in that? There is none. It takes an afternoon to collect 25 signatures, but for 56,000 ballots, it takes years and millions of dollars. So there is no equity. And then once you do get on the ballot and you run, obviously it's hard to win, especially when these two parties have controlled everything. They've written all the rules. All the campaign finance laws were written by these two, so they know the loopholes and they take advantage of it. My opponent in this race raised $2 million between his PAC and his political campaign. $2 million for a seat that pays $6,000 a year. Now, the reason that it makes sense to raise $2 million for it is because there's a lot of power. We have as of this year, will be a $10.3 billion budget. So people want to be able to control that. So they'll give you money so that you win, so that then they have access to that position. So there's a lot of things that are coming together, and my view changed so much. I was kind of a Pollyanna. I was very optimistic, and I was like, you know what? If enough people know what's going on, they're going to rally and they're going to be like, yes, we want change. And what I came to realize was there are people that want that. It's just that we're not there yet. People have to work every day to survive. And if you're in the business of surviving, you don't know what happens in government. You can't care. It's impossible to care about what's happening in government when you need to survive, when you need to put food on the table and your kids need medicine and need to go to school and they have their extracurricular. It's just impossible. So the reality is, in the current system, the way it stands, I don't think we're going to be able to change things. I think it's going to have to be bigger. I mean, if COVID couldn't change people's minds on how terrible the government is for them, I don't know that somebody standing up and saying, hey, this is bad, we need to do something different, is going to change their minds. I just don't see it.
That point is, what you said previously, I think it's really incredible that, it's all about leisure. Leisure gives you the time to research, or at least see, or even just give you time to think about different options. Like, why is the world like this, or why is the system like this? When you're in survival, or in a treadmill lifestyle, you're just not thinking about that. You're just literally thinking about just putting money in the bank to get food and stuff, especially with kids. So, I fully understand that, and I think that's where we are. And it's it's got worse and worse. So more people are spending time working to feed the family due to inflation and whatnot. So, I think the whole thing might have to break down until we see the majority of people waking up. But I guess the people who know about this can really be fulfilled in a sense that they can build outside of it. And I think that's probably the solution right now, is to build outside of the system, rather than finding solutions inside the system. But you know what? Kudos to you actually experiencing that, because I think it takes a lot, and put yourself out there.
I'm still, again, it's only been just over 2 weeks, so I'm still exhausted. Running for office is tiresome. It takes a lot of your time. Going and knocking on people's doors is, especially in this heat. Miami is, 90 plus degree weather every day. It rains on you. So going out and knocking on doors, going out and trying to have these conversations with people takes a lot out of you. So I feel like I'm still trying to recover from that. And maybe that's clouding my view and why I'm so pessimistic right now about the outcome. But I really do see it. If you are every single day struggling, and the government every day just makes things a little bit more difficult. And that I have noticed. It's
slowly, right?
Slowly, it's that, how do you boil a frog? And the solution is to raise the temperature little by little. That is happening here in America. If you look, we're being told inflation isn't that bad. Inflation isn't that bad? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It cost you $100 to put food on your table last year, and this year it cost you $120. Where are you getting those extra $20 from? And then it costs you more money to put gas in your car, and it costs you more money to do the certain things. To travel is more expensive. So even enjoying life becomes more expensive. So it is. They are making life more and more difficult. You have to work more and more. Electricity costs are going up, et cetera. Everything's going up. Healthcare costs keep going up. So people feel that pressure. But since it's so small and almost imperceptible, you kind of just go with it. You don't realize what's happening. So I do think they are boiling America slowly, just a little bit at a time. And that America that existed, that overthrew the British government, in 1776, that America is long gone. And we're now the America of, instead of 3% tax, be gone, British. We are now with, but you need to pay your fair share because, not everyone has all the opportunities you've had. And I just don't see how that's going to get us anywhere.
Yeah, don't worry. It's not just America. I mean, I know America's pretty at the forefront of this, but in London and UK, inflation, people with very good jobs are struggling to just have a good time, basically, because their costs of living are just insane. So yeah, things over there are pretty crazy. Even here, the wages are really low in the EU, especially Southern Europe. They basically earn peanuts, really. So they can only afford to basically survive, and then they don't really have anything past that. It's just basically just loans to pay for holidays or cars and stuff. That's what they do in Southern Europe, as I can understand now being here. But yeah, it's just an interesting.
That's a tough life.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I see there is solutions, and I think it's just people need to take things into their own hands now, in my opinion, and sort of avoid.
That's scary.
It is, yeah.
And people don't want to.
It is scary, yeah. It is, especially when you're not used to it. People don't want to take
things into their own hands.
Yeah.
Right. And we've been slowly, part of that boiling of the frog, we've been slowly taking people away from the natural humanity of having to take care of their own stuff. There's plenty of people in the United States that don't understand that the meat they eat comes from a cow. How could we be so disconnected? It's something that it sounds funny, but it's like you can go, I see tons of these videos on TikTok or whatever of creators that'll stand in the middle of Times Square and ask questions like,
oh yeah, I've seen those, yeah.
Where does this come from? And people don't know. It's almost ridiculous to say, but in America, people don't know that their chicken comes from a chicken.
Yeah,
it's like
no one knows where food comes from.
How did we get here?
No one knows where food comes from. No. It's amazing.
No, it's like they grow on trees magically.
Yeah. It's
terrible.
It's so interesting.
How did we get here?
I don't know. I really don't know. My grandmother and grandfather.
Which is why we need to get into. Sorry.
Yeah, go on. Go ahead.
There's an overlap with our time.
Go ahead.
I was just saying that this is why we need to get into crypto. People need to be able to go outside
That's
the system.
Next topic.
It's the only solution I see.
It's like you read my mind.
You were saying about your grandmother.
Well, I was going to say they used to live very basic. Like they just used to, they know how to live almost off the grid. So they're used to it. And I think we're going to slowly maybe need to find those skills to try and do that if you want freedom. Because I think I don't believe there's going to be food shortages. I believe there will be food, but what are you going to trade for that? And that will probably be your freedom. And that's potentially where we're going. And I think that the skills you learn as your grandparents and your great-grandparents, how they used to live, I mean, they could survive without anyone, telling them what to do, sort of thing. So it's just interesting how we've sort of fallen off in the last 100 years. But yeah. Incredible how we've done that. I mean, I wish more people understood how to raise their own food, how to do things for themselves. But also it's a scary thing, not only for those people that don't want to, but even for us that know how to do it. It is scary to have that responsibility. Because I mean, I can grow food, but I don't know that I could grow food consistently to feed my family during a whole year. Yeah.
And I think that's where they get us. And that's what I see with Cuba, going back to that subject almost, people in Cuba can't grow things and they no longer know how to grow things. So even if they were allowed to, I don't know that they could. So where do you go from there? Where do you go from a population that doesn't have the skills? It's a scary thing to watch. And I wonder why it is that this is the goal. And it seems to be the goal worldwide. So why?
Yeah, it's a massive learning curve. I'm doing it myself, and like just things you would never think of, like water drilling and knowing how far underneath the water is and how solar panels can be installed, and just all of these things. It's just an insane amount of information that you wouldn't be taught in school, because obviously you'll be free if you left school and you knew all of this. But yeah, no,
I'm sure that trigonometry they teach you is going to come really helpful at some point.
Sometimes I use it to edit the videos. So you actually touched upon.
They don't even teach that in school.
What did you say again? Sorry.
They don't even teach you how to edit videos in school. Like, there's no skill that I feel like is really necessary today, other than reading and writing, that is really being taught in school.
That's why I'm aiming to homeschool, for sure. Because I only see it really deteriorating, and you just learn how to get a job. That's it. Even if it's well paid, it's a job that you probably will end up hating by the time you retire. And when you retire, you wait for a pension, which you probably won't get nowadays anyway. So it's like, forget that. No entrepreneurial and creativity, that has been lost in our children. So I aim to teach that for sure for the next generation.
And then you're punished if you are. You're punished if you are. If you are somebody who is able to do things for yourself, then, and I don't know if this is happening worldwide, but here in America, you're being told that you're privileged, that somehow those things that you figured out make you so unbelievably special above other people. And therefore, you have to then help or provide for others because you figured it out. So it's almost being punished. And I think that's a very weird place we are in too, is this mentality that if somebody managed to do something for themselves, now they're the enemy.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does.
It's what I'm feeling. It's what I'm seeing here.
It's interesting. Before we go into crypto a little bit, it's so interesting that, because I feel like if there wasn't tax, especially how much tax, but let's say I don't agree with the whole thing, but if there wasn't tax and all this government intervention, people would have more wealth and would be willing to help people who aren't as privileged, who haven't made it as far as you did, because they'll have more wealth and they'll have more freedom. So they'll feel like, okay, I really want to give. At the moment, no one wants to give because they're just surviving. So no one ever gets that as well. But yeah.
Sure. And even if you didn't want to give, I mean, look at how the government taxes us, at least again, back to America, because it's what I know, but it's forced. They take the money before you even receive it. But with the technology we have today, there's no excuse for that. We could very well be told you have X number of dollars that you're supposed to pay in taxes. Which department would you like to contribute to? Would you like to contribute to education? Would you like to contribute to the war? Would you like to contribute? And then I think people would choose. And it's like, no, our streets need to be fixed. I want my tax dollars to go to the streets. Or I have children in school. I want my schools to be better. Why are we not allowed to choose where our money is going with today's technology? And the answer is, the moment you get to choose, then the United States government won't be able to bomb whoever they want, and we won't be able to send aid to whoever they want, to their buddies, and so on and so forth. So it's insulting that we are told that we don't contribute enough, and then our own infrastructure is crumbling, but we are sending money to all sorts of countries around the world. And it's not that I don't want to help those countries. I absolutely think Ukraine should be able to defend itself from Russia. And I think that, it's terrible what's happening in Israel, and it's terrible what's happening in Latin America, and it's terrible. But we should be able to contribute freely and not be forced into these things. And going back to crypto, and I hope this is a segue into it, this is exactly why we need to be focused on crypto, because it's the opposite of our currency. Instead of us being forced to do things and to apply, well, they can't do that with crypto. They can't just steal sure, you can steal, but it's a lot harder to just take from you without your consent. And crypto for me is consent culture.
Yeah, so let's move on to that. So that's actually where I found who you were. Actually, was through the Monerotopia tour conference. That's basically where I found you, and I was interested because not many people in general really know too much about Monero, especially someone who's running for commissioner. And I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. So, what's your take on crypto and especially Monero and privacy coins? Because we like privacy coins here. We see it as a solution, especially for the alternative society. So what are your thoughts on Monero as a solution?
I think, so I got to crypto the way I feel most people did as a libertarian. I heard Ross Ulbricht's story. He's the America's political prisoner. He's the guy that's in jail for the Silk Road, which was a free market website that used Bitcoin. In the Bitcoin community, they say that Satoshi Nakamoto is the number one, right? He created Bitcoin and he gave rise to this crypto movement, so to say. And then Ross gave it a use case. So I think a lot about Ross. And as things have evolved, I used to be very much Bitcoin. And then I realized Bitcoin won't solve the problem in Cuba. And why won't it solve the problem in Cuba? Because Bitcoin, you can trace it. And there's a law in Cuba that if you receive money from outside of Cuba, from people that the government deems to be, against the government or whatever, you can go to jail in Cuba for over 10 years. And so, well, if I send you Bitcoin in Cuba and they trace it back to me, the government knows who I am and knows that I am totally against the Cuban government. And so anybody that I send Bitcoin to in Cuba is going to potentially face 10 years in jail. Well, I can't send them Bitcoin. I can't do that to somebody. I can't put somebody in jail. That's selfish. So I started down a path of, well, what would be the right way to send money, to send crypto into Cuba, and what would that look like? And I came across Monero. Obviously, there's Zcash and Pirate Chain, and there are many others. So when I talk about Monero, it's because it's what I know, just like I talk about America because it's what I know. But I don't mean this to be like this is the only coin. There are many others, and please don't start sending me messages telling me that I missed all of these other coins. I'm sure they're there. But Monero to me is the solution because you just can't trace it. It's untraceable, and I'm not a crypto person that's into crypto to make money. I'm not here to make money. To me, the value of the dollar is only worth on what we can trade for it, and every day I can trade less for it. So the value of the dollar is going down. So it doesn't matter to me what the price of Bitcoin or Monero is because it's relative to the dollar. And as I said, to me, the dollar is it's going to be worthless. Yeah. So what do I think about Monero? I think it's going to be the change that Cuba needs if only we can come together and create a platform so that people, start implementing it. Because the Cuban government is implementing Bitcoin as a way to take remittance dollars from people here and keep the Bitcoin and give them a worthless currency. There's two currencies in Cuba. Neither of them are worth anything outside of Cuba. Here in the United States, we have this place called Chuck E. Cheese. I call Cuban money Chuck E. Cheese because it's the same. You go there, you give your good dollars, and you get these Chuck E. Cheese coins, and you put it into little machines, but those coins don't work outside of Chuck E. Cheese. That's Cuba. You get this MLC currency, which works in their government stores. But if you leave Cuba with a stack of MLC, which, by the way, it's a digital currency, so it doesn't even exist. It's a card with a currency, which makes it even worse. But if you went with that card anywhere in the world, it wouldn't work. So they're forcing Cubans to use a currency that the government can completely manipulate and is worthless anywhere else. And they're exchanging it for Bitcoin now. And so when any government gets into a currency, I have to wonder why. Why is the Cuban government getting into Bitcoin? Well, they're pushing it really hard so that they can control the Cuban people.
Mm-hmm. Bitcoin solved the central bank issue, like printing money, but it doesn't solve the privacy issue. So it's even worse than fiat in the sense that it can be traced a lot harder, a lot easier. Sorry, a lot easier.
Yeah.
So we saw that with the truckers in Canada. If if they use Monero, there wouldn't be an issue. So I think
there wouldn't have been.
So there's
use dollars, if they use a Canadian dollar, if they used Bitcoin, everything was traceable and everything. And we saw people going to jail for giving money. So it's not that we're talking about a dystopian future. We're talking about the reality of today. We're talking about the fact that you can be traced and punished for giving money for the things that you believe in. And that is where I think people need to be focused on. It's not some crazy idea. They showed us that that's the plan.
Yeah, and that was in Canada, exactly.
That was in Canada.
Yeah.
In freedom, supposedly. And here we are. So if you're telling me that a country like Cuba that has zero freedom is somehow going to be better on Bitcoin, I don't agree. I think that they're going to use it against the people. We've already seen it happen. And meanwhile, the Cuban government, the regime, because it's not a government, it's a regime, is collecting Bitcoin. They intend to transact in Bitcoin so that they can get around the sanctions that stop them from acquiring arms or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, interesting. Just to sort of finish off on that point, I see like the developing nations using Bitcoin as their sort of currency, and then the larger nations creating their central bank digital currencies. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing El Salvador, a small nation. I'm seeing Cuba potentially, and other nations that maybe aren't ready to create their own are using Bitcoin. But the larger nations who can probably afford to do it, or they're sort of able to, are creating their own CBDCs, which are potentially around the corner. So people should get to know Monero and how it's used, and definitely is a solution and something for us sort of in the alternative space to help our sort of economy going. Because now I actually use Monero quite often to pay people and receive, which I didn't do before. So definitely get into that market. I think it's not illegal to do that. It's just an option we have, and it's a ready-made solution that we have.
I don't really use my Monero, and that's something that I need to do better on. I feel good having it there stored.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think we need to start using it more often. It's one of those things where, you buy gold and silver and you don't necessarily use it. That's my exit plan, if need be, is Monero. So I kind of like having it there. Sure, I'll accept Monero, but I don't know that I want to spend it. And I know that I'm going to get attacked for that, because it's like, no, you have to. It's part of creating the system. And it's like,
Yeah, I think the value of it will probably be good.
About it.
Because it's so it's actually got some use case. It's like, I need to have some of that.
I need to have it.
Yeah. So mine's running a bit low now because I'm paying people with it, and I'm like, shit, like I need to really buy some more.
And I bought Monero when it was at a great price too. So although I don't care to make money off of it, I'm not dumb. I would rather make money off of it. So I bought it at a great price, and I would really like to just leave it there. I really do think that if if the world plays out the way we've talked about it playing out, Monero is going to be extremely valuable. So this is not financial advice. I do not give out financial advice, but I really like Monero.
Yeah. Even not in dollar terms, who cares? It's more about use case that it will be worth. But it'll probably be worth a lot in US dollars as well. But it is the use case that, it's the use case that really matters. Great. I mean, so to end, I guess, what are you doing now? What is the future holding for you after the sort of commissioner stuff that you did? What's next for you? What are you doing? And just go into that.
Yeah. So the future for me, I have several projects. Like I said, I took a year off to be able to run. So first things first, I'm starting a new company. I'm in working on just getting back to making money myself. I mean, I took this chance on this race and I need to get back into that. But also I found that content creation on these subjects is near and dear to my heart. I didn't get into the seat that I wanted to be able to affect change, but I think change comes in many different ways. And creating content, explaining to people situations, what's going on is the next step for me. And keep pushing that envelope, keep pushing this is what's going on and this is how you can prepare for what's happening. And then finally, my pet project that's been my pet project for a long time and will continue to be, which is Cuba. The freedom of Cuba to me is front and foremost. It's the thing I think about right before going to bed. It's the thing I think about right when I wake up. And Monero is going to play a huge part in this. I unfortunately, with the run, had to set down my plans with Monero and Cuba, and I intend to pick them back up and hit the ground running with it. I believe in a system for Cuba that will be the use case. I would like to call the future website that I have in mind Silk Road, but in Spanish, El Camino de Seda, and create an eBay-style marketplace that exchanges on Monero for Cubans on the island, because the only way that they can realistically get ahead is to exchange amongst themselves. And they're using WhatsApp groups to exchange. So for example, you'll have a WhatsApp group from your town or your block or whatever, and people will post there, oh, I have this for anybody that would want. And somebody else says, oh, I'll buy it from you. But what happens in that is people get stolen from. A lot of times what they claim that the product isn't that same thing. So you can't leave reviews. Think about the Silk Road and what it was. If anybody that went on the Silk Road back in the day, you could buy literally anything. As a matter of fact, that one of the top sellers on the Silk Road was insulin. People think it was just these hardcore drugs. Well, Ross Ulbricht solved people's medical problems by allowing the free exchange of goods and services, including medicine. So I think that that's the future for Cuba, as a website a la Silk Road, or a little bit like eBay, whatever the case may be, but a platform where people can exchange goods and services. And this time using a money that cannot be traced. So that is my pet project. I still continue to struggle to smuggle drugs into Cuba. We have been working on that. And again, something else that was on the back burner, but is coming back strong. Getting more medicine into Cuba, into the hands of Cubans, so that they can keep fighting, so that they can keep working and, promoting freedom in Cuba. So lots of plans. I don't intend to stop anytime soon. The run was just one small thing, and I hope to keep being able to be that pioneer for freedom. Which brings me to LibertyCon. They're having Students for Liberty is having an event here in Miami, and they asked me to be the MC. So anything freedom related, that is my jam. That is what I am doing. Anything that can push that needle a little bit forward. Anything. I'm willing to do anything and everything to promote freedom, because I think that that's the frontier. That's the next frontier. That is our civil rights movement, is freedom.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, it's I'm sure you learned so much on that sort of commissioner run, but yeah, I'm sure you learned so much to move on to your next projects, and I'm sure you'll continue doing great work. So yeah, don't stop. I'm definitely not stopping, and people around me are definitely not stopping either. So yeah, just keep going, and it's great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Nice one. Excellent. Thanks, Martha, for joining me. We've got to probably wrap it up there. I do look forward to potentially having you on in the future to discuss your projects that you actually move forward with. So it'll be good to catch up again. Make sure you guys subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Share if you know someone who would really find this valuable. Plus, check out all the show notes for a link to cryptonymousconsulting.com. We help you guys grow and preserve your wealth to have the sort of potential to build away from the system. Also, where can people find you? I actually completely forgot. Where do people find you, Martha?
So I'm in the process of rebranding. If you go to my website now, you'll see the campaign stuff, and obviously that's out of date. But you can find me on all social media at Bueno for Miami, and website marthabueno.com. And then during the campaign, I was on OnlyFans, and I intend to keep that OnlyFans account. But it's not sexual, it's political. So if you're interested in political content, onlyfans.com/Bueno305.
Nice one. We'll put all the links to the material in the show notes. Definitely check that out, guys. Peace and love to you all, and thanks for listening. Thanks, Martha, again.
Thank you.